Welcome back to Exponential 201. Here we are at module number 6, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and begin to really think deeply about what happens next. This one's called Project 13, the task force, and the job descriptions. So if you haven't been given your role yet, it'll be a chance for you all to talk about it during this time. But literally, there are 5 specific roles that we call the Project 13 task force. Each one of you have to take on this role. I've got the role here and the job descriptions, and we're going to talk through each of those so that you get a real understanding of what needs to happen, what that person's responsible for. You would, even if you're the task force member on that, you're going to need other people to volunteer or work alongside you, other staff members or volunteers or whatever, to help you make that possible. And there's going to be a lot of overlap and collaborating needed among all of you on all the 5 task forces, as you'll see here. So just a quick overview. The leadership buy-in task force member, that should be the senior pastor. And pastor, if you have an assistant or a right-hand person that can be a part of that, I would encourage you to have somebody that can help you with that, but we really need your authority to get the leadership influenced appropriately. Okay, number 2 is building the path. That is the person who's building this pathway for change we've been talking about, or assimilating. If you're not going to build it, you're assimilating it, and that really takes focus and attention. Number 3, leadership training for the youth. Remember the leadership training that we talked about? Somebody's got to really focus on building that leadership track and then hovering over the implementation of that. Number 4 is the epic events, planning and executing the 13-year-old epic events. And then 5, the research, the measurement, and the logistics. And that is, we'll be showing you some of the measurements, the agile dashboard and all of that. But how do you get those? How do you track those? We're going to be looking at the spreadsheets, and I want all of you to track with me as we go through the spreadsheets in just a few minutes here, in a few lessons, because I want you all to understand, to be able to read these spreadsheets, because you're all going to be looking at them. You may or may not be filling them in. You might send all your information to the number 5 person, the research and measurements person, but they're going to fill it in, and you got to look at it, and you all need to look at it and analyze. Some of you might be wondering, well, which of these jobs should the youth pastor be doing? Well, that's a whole nother session on the youth pastor of the future. But what I would say is a youth pastor or main youth leader ought to be like, rename them like the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Project 13, because they shouldn't be limited to just one of these areas. They should have input in the path. They should have input in the leadership training, and obviously in the epic events and the research. So anyways, I would encourage you to not just isolate. You can't make that person do all these, but you need their influence and their input on these, okay, as they evolve into the youth pastor and the youth leader of the future. So let's get going here. Lesson 1 here in this module is the leadership buy-in job description. So pastor, you and your associate that's working with you, is you're thinking about all the different groups of leaders that need to be brought into this world and how to bring them in. And so whether that's, as we mentioned before, the deacons, the elders, but this is your role. You've got to leverage your leadership. You're the chief, remember, strategist. And so all of this is kind of bubbling out of you. And you want to make sure that whenever these presentations are made to leaders that are key leaders in the church, groups of leaders, you want to be there. Elders, influential church members, and of course, how you roll it out to the church, how you roll it out to the staff. Very important that you use the change management techniques and tools that we gave you earlier. But the pastor, you need to own this. Like, you got to make sure that they know this is not a kind of a cool youth program and the youth pastor's doing it. The senior pastor's thinking about the future of the church. Remember, we talked about you can even use the analogy if you want, the long game. The baseball thinks about the long game. They're going after children and then 13-year-olds and then your AAA ball, and we're going after the long game as a church. We're no longer doing the short game. We're not just monitoring week to week. We're going after what's going to happen in 5 years and 10 years, okay? So ultimately, pastor, you're going to be introducing this on a Sunday morning to the whole church. Might be about 4 weeks in advance. You'll see it as we go month by month here, in advance of the first big epic event. So what that look like, that intro could look like, is kind of a microcosm of what it could look like as you're introducing it into other groups. So for example, you got video clips, you're using stats, you're using maybe some of the slides we've given you, you're communicating vision, you're asking people to pray. You might be using the whole urgency of passing the baton to the next generation. Hold a baton in your hand and talk about passing the baton. And there's there's only a certain season, the exchange zone that we have to get it to them. And if we don't, they're not going to get it. And if you've got a group of leaders you're talking to, you might even have their names written on there. I've done that to different groups where I'll have their names engraved beforehand and I'll pass them all out because I know that you're committed to getting this baton to the next generation. And then ask them to commit. Ask them to get engaged, ask them to get involved, whatever group or leadership group that you're asking them to do, and make sure there's different levels of commitment. So you're not saying you need to win the whole generation of 13-year-olds, but could you have Coke with one once a month? Take on one as a Joshua. Could you pray? Is that too hard? Could you put somebody in your car and bring them to the event? And so depending on the group, you're asking them, you're not just informing them, you're engaging their heart, and you're asking them to engage in doing something to be a part of this, okay? So remember, I'll just mention it again. Remember the change management principles. Refresh your memory. Go back and look at those slides or watch those again if you want to. And so that you can use storytelling. Don't just use data. Be sure that you're aware of those who might have the propensity to harden themselves to change. And remember that you don't have to, you got two tracks going. The one track is everything you've been doing for a long time. The second track is the new track, okay? You don't have to make them into one track right away. So it's okay, you're just enough to get them excited and dip their toe in the water if they want to. So I encourage you to have kind of really a well thought out how you're going to communicate. Sermon, PowerPoint notes, either for leaders or for parents, for the church. Think of all the subgroups that you want to introduce it to. And I will tell you, the more that you can do it before you introduce it to the church, the more you can do it to a lot of subgroups. So even maybe most of the church has already heard a piece of it before you announce it to everybody. The more they'll feel involved. You can also at those moments have a chance for Q&A where they ask questions. When you're talking about paradigm shift, the first thing that people do when you start talking about paradigm shift is they defend their old paradigm. You mean we're not going to do this? Why aren't we going to do that? They're defensive, okay? It takes a while for them, even if you're really persuasive and you use all the materials and communication tools and touch their heart, they still defend their old paradigm. Why? Because they thought about it a lot and they haven't thought about the new paradigm a lot. So of course they're going to defend it. Otherwise, why would they have had it? And so by giving them a chance to ask questions, say, listen, we're still fleshing this out. We've learned a lot about this. We've hungered down. We've started planning. But do you have any questions? I might not have all your answers, but I want you to know that we're open to your questions and your comments and your ideas, and that we're not alone in this, though. There are other pastors around our country, around the world, that are going through this and that are learning. There are already churches that are doing this all around the world, and so we're not trying to invent it as we go, but we are going to custom fit it for our ministry, for our church, for our community. So, but have a well thought through kind of a presentation with PowerPoints and notes and or videos and that kind of thing. So they're not thinking you're just talking off the top of your head. So that's the first job description for leadership buy-in. The first member of this task force for Project 13 is leadership buy-in general that's doing that. Okay, we'll be on to the next lesson with the next job description.